Hello, everyone. My name is Piotr and I'm a founder and product manager of Dataedo. And today I'd like to talk to you about how to document a database to make it more manageable. There's a number of challenges when you're working with databases, when you're designing them or querying or doing any kinds of analytics. And I will list a number of those challenges and show you practical tips how we can mitigate those challenges with a good, useful documentation. After this part, I will show you the Dataedo tool, how you can get started with building your documentation right away and how you can share it with your team. And at the end, I will answer your questions. If you have any questions, use questions tab on your right-hand side, and I will review them at the end. Okay, let's get started. So the first solution I'd like to advise you is to find a good fortune teller. Obviously, it's not a very practical solution. Let's get more serious. And what I will actually advise you to do is to use a good documentation tool. And I would like to encourage you to use Dataedo. You can do it after my presentation. There's a 30-day free trial. So you can get started even today. Okay, Dataedo is a documentation tool based on the repository. You can import all your database schema of all your databases into one repository, then document all the elements and share it with your colleagues in convenient HTML documentation, which I will show you in the later part. Okay, now let's get to the challenges. Where can I find this data? Many databases have plenty of tables. They have confusing names. So let's say you're trying to build a report and you need customers and orders data. So how do you start? Well, you can ask people, but if you don't have anyone to ask, you need to connect to the database and just go table by table, trying to figure this out. It's not always practical. The tables are not, they don't always have the meaningful names. They sometimes have misleading names. So my solution to this is to provide an alias within the Dataedo documentation itself. So you can see over here that there is a table called RES, and that is totally confusing and unclear what it is. So I have provided a meaningful alias called resources. So now everybody who will access the documentation will know what it is, what it actually represents, and it will be able to search for it and find it easily. And the other solution, which comes in the next point, is to group objects into something we call modules. So let's get to the next one. Challenge number 2, what are all those tables? What you can see on the screen right now is a list of tables from Oracle applications. So all those tiny dots represent one table or one view. It's not completely overwhelming. So how do you deal with this? So I propose a simple solution, and that is to group those objects into so-called modules. So what you can see over here are modules, and I have assigned some specific tables to certain modules. That way I will be able to narrow my search. So if I'm looking for orders information or customers information, I will go first into specific modules, and that way they are very small and manageable pieces of the database. Challenge number 3, what is this table for? So I have found this table, it's called DM or the QAGGR, yeah, right? And it has some columns. I have no clue what that is for. Can I use it? I mean, what it actually is. It's quite, you'll get this question quite often when you are going through database, and yeah, you figure out what are you actually looking at. So my solution to this is to, as previously, provide meaningful title alias, assign module, and assign owner. So if you now look at this, it makes much more sense. So you know that this is an aggregate for quarterly orders. You know that this was used for something called quarterly sales reporting. That can be meaningful to you. You might know that there is such an application or reporting system called that way, and now you know what it is used for. When you provide an owner, you know who to talk to. So having this information is so much easier than having just this. Challenge number 4. What does this table hold? This is an example of a table from SAP system. As you can see, those names of table and columns are very, very cryptic. So this comes from the very old times where engineers try to save space, and they thought that 4 or 5 letter naming would be good for everybody. Well, that's not the case. When you look at this table, you have no clue what actually you're looking at. So our solution. Oh yeah, and not only saving space might be the reason. Sometimes it's just a lazy architect, right? Okay, so my solution: titles and aliases and their descriptions. So have a look below. Right now, this is so much easier to figure out what this actually is. So you can see that those actual names of those fields, they are not even close, right? So you wouldn't be able to guess just by looking at the name. SAP is a very extreme example, but I'm sure you will have this kind of experiences with other databases as well. Challenge number 5. Is this table still being used? So you're going through the list of tables and you're wondering, can I use it? Is it actually being still used? So our solution, add a status field and provide it for every table. That way you know where in the life cycle this table actually is right now. You can have multiple labels, you can define them there yourself. So in this case, you can see that illustration table is deprecated. You shouldn't be using this anymore. Challenge number 6: who created this table? Similar to the previous one, you go through the list of tables and you were wondering, was this delivered by the vendor, or is it something we have created? Was it me or some of my colleagues? Again, you add a simple column owner, you provide some labels, and that way is so much more manageable. You actually know right now who you should talk to about the table. Challenge number 7. Which columns should I care for? So you have an example of on the screen from the Oracle application, which is a packaged application for multiple purposes, and quite often they have many columns designed for generic purposes or something that should be determined at the implementation time. So you can see there's a number of attribute columns and you have no idea what is it actually something that's holding any data. Quite often it doesn't, and you shouldn't be bothered with this at all. And again, our solution is to add a status field. You could also provide a alias over here that says unused or ignored or something like that. That way you can focus your energy on actually what actually holds some data meaningful to you. Challenge number 8. Where does this data come from? So I have a dimension table from a data warehouse on my screen, and I'm wondering, did that come from CRM or did that come from our ordering system? Or so where is it from? So you could add a simple list of metadata fields that would tell you what's the source system, what's the source table even or column. Challenge number 9: how to calculate this value. So most of the data is preserved in the tables, but some of it is derivative. So you need to do some calculations or string concatenation to get certain values, and it's not obvious. Let me give you some examples. First one is an invoice amount. You get the invoice amount by adding net amount and tax. So this is quite obvious, assuming somebody knows that net amount is not the invoice amount, right? But this one is quite easy. But let's imagine an ordering system that has so many different fields like quantity ordered, canceled, shipped, received, and so on. So how do you actually know what was actually purchased by the customer, or what was delivered, and so on? That could be tricky or quite often impossible to reverse engineer that, and it would be definitely a waste of time to figure that out every time you want to write a report showing this number. Example number 3, this is something from my experience. Imagine some documents have complicated numbering systems, and this ID is very important because it exists in all the printed documents, and it should be included in the reports. But how do you know how to get it? It's often not. It doesn't exist as a field. It's a concatenation from various fields. In this case, the first part is depends on the type of the document, and the format of the rest depends on the title as well. So I have wasted like a day to try to figure out, reverse engineer, looking at different printed documents and trying to figure out different kinds of documents to figure out the format. And that's a complete waste of time if somebody has done it in the first place. So our solution: create a manual column in the data dictionary and provide a calculation formula. So imagine different kinds of things you'd like to include in your reports, and then just provide a virtual column for it and provide a calculation. That way, all you need to do is to look up at the documentation and you're ready to go. You are day ahead. Challenge number 10. What does a specific value in a column represent? Let's take a very common example of status field. So we have, there is a status, but what are the values? What do they actually represent? So we have queried the table, and there are just single letters. So how do you figure out? You could know that A is approved, but let's say some examples. You don't have a place where to check that out. So. Simple solution: list all the values in the documentation and provide the labels and explanations for those values. That saves a lot of work and bugs in the reports. Challenge number 11. Okay, so is there a lookup table for status? It's quite common that these kind of fields, they have those simple codes, and sometimes there is a lookup table, sometimes there is not. You would definitely like to know if there is a lookup table because, you don't need to do a guesswork in the first place. So how do we deal with this? Well, we show the relationship, so a foreign key to a table. We show it in the references column. You can see that this particular field references there is a lookup table called complaint statuses, and we get this information from the foreign keys. But most of the time, this kind of information is not defined in the database itself. So you need to do a little research, and when you find out the lookup table, you can define this relationship over here within our repository. Using Dataedo, you just define it as a foreign key, and that way this information is complete. So you know all the foreign keys and lookup tables to your table. Challenge number 12. How do you join tables? That's a tricky one. That's extension of the previous one. It's not always obvious how you can join tables. So let me add to what I just said. So we use foreign keys. We show you those next to the column. We show them also in tabular form, showing how the joins actually work. And also what you can do, once you have this information completed in your repository, you can, so this is where you define the foreign key. So this is the form. And once you have the information, you can visualize it with ear diagrams. So you do it in a number of smaller diagrams, and I will show that later in my demo of the tool. Challenge number 13. So what objects are used by this particular app, module, or functionality? Let's imagine you have a large database which is developed over many years, and you have created this small piece of functionality, and you would like to know what tables are related to it, what procedures, the logic sits in which procedures, and so on. So again, the answer is create modules. So when you create a module for a specific functionality, it could be a report, it could be some module in an application, it could be some separate application. You should define a module and then assign different types of objects to it. And that will give you a single page with a description of this module, of this functionality, what it does, and so on. You can also provide additional information like an owner and so on. And you have a list of all the related objects. Challenge number 14. Can I reuse this view? So views are very practical and very tricky at the same time. So views can embed a lot of functionality, like I said about those calculations. You can embed these calculations in a view. However, views, it's really easy to create views, and my experience tells me that people do not always, developers don't actually put so much energy into naming them, and it's so easy to create them that after a while have hundreds of those views. And yeah, so when you find some view you think you could reuse it from some other report, you have some questions. So one is, what does that actually return? So is it actually the data I need to get? And the other question is, what is it used for? What was it created for? So the solution, describe the view, assign module. So by assigning module, will tell which kind of report that was created for. When you reuse it, assign it also to the module representing the piece of functionality you're currently working on. So the next person will know it's used right now by two different functionalities. Assign the owner. That will help you to talk to the right person, make sure this is something you need. And also to help you understand what it returns, because views are actually, it's really easy to make them return very different kinds of granularity of data. So there can be duplicated rows, but maybe that's the intention. So views themselves do not have primary or unique keys. Some databases do allow that, but it's a minority. So what you should do is to create this, define the primary or unique keys to indicate what is the assumption that the view returns, what kind of granularity. It's particularly important if you'd like to join the view with something, so you do not double results. Okay, challenge number 15. Can I modify this view? This is derivative from the previous one. So again, what is it used for, and who is the owner? Who should I talk to? I have a similar set of advice. Again, describe the view. What's the purpose? What do columns represent? And after you're done, after let's say you have added some column, update the documentation. This is the very important thing to remember. Documentation needs to be updated. Okay, so there are many more challenges. This was my list, and I hope you found it useful. Later on in questions, you can ask, maybe share your own challenges, and I'll try to answer them. Let's see how you can get started with Dataedo and the documentation I just showed you right away. So Dataedo is a desktop tool that produces the HTML export. Right, so if you would like to get started working with it, first download the software from our website, install it. Currently we have a Windows installer. In the future we will have also a online web portal, but that's in a couple of months. So install it. Then you need to create a repository. So repository is this storage where you actually create all the where you store all your documentation, where you import the metadata into, and all the information is stored. So there are two types of repositories. There is a file repository that's very easy, quick to get started. We don't need any additional software. And there is a server repository. Server repository is a SQL Server database. This is the advised implementation. This is much better for team working and performance also. So you click new repository, you provide the connection details to the server. The repository gets created, you connect to it. If you use file, you just click this, the file will be created, and this is what you'll see. I have a number of connections over here, but you'll just see it sampled ones. So what you do next is you need to import metadata to the repository. So you need to provide the connections to your databases. So to do it, you click Add, you choose Database Connection. You choose the engine. That we have a number of different native connectors. We also have a ODBC connector that supports majority of the sources. The metadata doesn't always include everything. So if you have a native connector, it's device to use this. Then you provide the connection details, hit connect. The database will be scanned, and we will import what you can see here. So list of tables, procedures, views, and so on. And with that, you'll see also all the columns, their data types, existing descriptions, foreign keys, unique keys, triggers, and so on. So we have created, we extracted what we have found in the database, and now it's your turn. This is where documentation part starts. Okay, so what you can do to document this schema is you can, let me choose another one, is you can provide a description for all the fields and as well tables. You can use a rich text editor. You can paste images over here. You can paste text from Word or some websites. It will keep the formatting. Yeah, you go through the list of columns. You document their purpose. You can also provide the titles, although I advise you to provide titles for columns and tables as well, where it's not obvious what the column represents. So calendar quarter is quite obvious. Let's skip that. But in any case, where it's not, you should provide the alternative title. So you can provide the descriptions. You can also provide some set of other fields. Those fields are defined by you. You can decide what kind of metadata you'd like to add to your documentation. So we have status. This could be a lookup field. This could be like freehand text or some other types of information. To help you with this task, we have created a progress of documentation. So you can see that this database is not documented at all, but you can see that AdventureWorks is documented almost entirely, and you can see here that this column is missing some descriptions. So this number represent descriptions for all the elements. You can also narrow it down to table columns, and right. So you can see here that it's 90%, and it's highlighted here that this particular column is missing description. Another thing that helps you with the documentation is the lookup, the description hints. So we look at the column name and throughout the catalog, and then we suggest you the existing descriptions from other tables, so we can quickly add the existing descriptions. It's very useful for fields like modified date, where they are all the same. You can also go to the list of all the fields with that name and also provide a description in bulk. That makes it much more easier. Okay, another thing you can do is for tables and views as well. You can provide unique keys and foreign keys. So in this case, you can see that this field has a foreign key. This is so if you go to the data warehouse, okay, so this database has primary keys, but data warehouses mostly do not, admins prefer not to define it for performance reasons. So what you do is to create a key by choosing columns, choose the type of the key. Let's say that this should be unique. You have just indicated that this column is unique. It doesn't impact your database. It is just in the repository for people using the data, so they know that somebody who created this table or documented assumes that full date label is unique. It's quite useful information. Another thing, even more important, are the relationships. So this is something I showed you. So we can go through the ET load ID, for instance. Yeah, it probably doesn't have a lookup table, but you can right click and define the relation. The interesting thing about this is you can explain the joins even across the databases. So you can show how this is related to tables in a separate documentation, right? So let's say that, it doesn't make sense, but assume it does. I have created, right? If I go back, you can see that it is reflected over here. It shows the name of the database. Okay, another thing which I covered a lot in my presentations are the modules. So modules are those folders you use to group objects and also provide some descriptions for and some narrative for a piece of functionality. It could be a documentation for a certain report or something in your system. So to create a module, you go to modules, you click new. When you have a module, you can go for, there's a number of ways to do it, but you can go through the list of tables and just drag and drop. You can also go through the list and create a new module and automatically assign those tables. You can assign a table to different modules. They could be even across documentation. So these are those logical folders you use to group or to group tables and other objects and provide additional metadata, more meaning to those objects. Okay, and when you have a module, you can create a ER diagram for the module. Well, actually, it could include tables and views from outside the module. So you can drag and drop those tables. Those relationships are being included automatically. You can look up the tables. So let's say, I can build a diagram for other, include objects from entire catalog, not just this particular database, right? This is quite convenient when I want to show how to how does the data relate across all databases, right? So I can, I don't know, add some other database table. I can choose which columns I'd like to show, and if there is no relationships, I can use as well this diagram tool to define those relationships between the tables, right? So again, I have the same form. I can create the relationships. Again, I'm just not actually taking those relationships that do not make sense, but it's just an example. You can see those manual ones, with the dotted line. Those represent the actual foreign keys from the database. Okay, so I've taken some time. I've created that, and now it's time to share it with my team. This is where the value is generated. So you can actually get everyone aware of the database and make it easy for everybody to work with it. It's easier to onboard new people. It's easier to, it's so much easier for your key people to get more time. People do not have to ask questions. So let's click export. We have a number of formats, but the advised one is the HTML. Then you just go through the wizard. We ask you a few questions, which databases you'd like to include, which fields, and so on. Let me switch to the document I've previously generated. So what you can see here, so this is a plain HTML document. It's interactive, so you can see I can navigate it, but it doesn't require any kind of server. You can host it on any web server. You can run it from your disk. You can share it in a shared folder. So it's very easy to share this documentation. And you can, as I showed you, it's searchable, right? I can also find specific columns, right? Customer ID, in this case, I found it, right? So all this I have built previously. It's here. I can navigate it. So foreign keys, right? I can see those modules, and I can see the diagrams I have created for those modules. Those module ear diagrams are also interactive, so I can navigate that as well. Right. So you can create this documentation even if you have just exported the plain metadata, because if you have some descriptions existing in a database, you can share them right away. So to get this document, it takes a couple of minutes. So install, create a repository, or just create a file, provide the connections, and import the schema from your databases, and generate this document and share it with your colleagues. That gives you a lot of value within just a couple of minutes. Okay, that is all I wanted to show you regarding the tool. Yeah, so this is just a summary of what I just showed you. And that's for the presentation. Let me see your questions now. Okay, Lauren asks, this was very helpful. How does it fit in with data asset register then? My company uses these three terms interchangeably, but they always produce the data dictionary in all three situations. This is a data catalog, metadata repository, database documentation tool. It has a lot of names. So I think it's the same thing. What Dataedo yes, the main asset we manage are the data assets imported automatically from the database. We also import the codes, the procedures, and other things we find in the database. We also allow you to build a data dictionary and link this to your data assets. This is slightly off topic. It's outside of what I wanted to show you today, but this is something you could call a data catalog or metadata repository or data asset register. I think there are different names for the same thing. Okay, we have a question from Lauren. How is data dictionary different from business glossary? What I have described here seems to be data dictionary. How do we roll this up into business glossary? So, okay, that's a good question. Actually, you can find in our webinar page a webinar on the business glossary and how to link it with data dictionary. So what I discussed today is just data dictionary plus scripts, right? Database code is outside of the data dictionary itself, but what I have presented is essentially data dictionary. Data dictionary is a registry database of all the data sets and their elements, so tables and columns or files and fields and so on. You understand the idea, plus additional information like descriptions, joins, unique keys, and so on. So what I have shown is pure data dictionary. Business glossary, however, is something completely different. The business glossary is a specification, is a documentation of business terms. So data dictionary describes the physical data, so data sets, and business glossary documents the terms as the business organization or industry understands them. This is unrelated to a specific data source. So let's say a customer, you can have a multiple customer tables in multiple systems, in data warehouse, CRM, ordering system, and so on. But there is just one term customer and how your company understands it. So what is being done in the modern metadata management and what Dataedo allows you to do is to define those both. Actually, I can show you the business glossary. So business glossary is this. So these are data dictionaries. Those are tables, and business glossary is a list of terms. And you have a definition of the term, right? And you can see that it's linked to the specific tables in this case and columns in this case, right? You can navigate across, right? So business glossary and data dictionary are two different metadata assets, and you can map them together to make a more meaningful understanding of your data environment. Okay, let's see if there are other questions. Okay, Georgi asked, can we say GDPR data fields in the tables from other data with some kind of filter, and after we export in separate documentary for GDPR purpose only? Okay, we have another. This is something I didn't show you, but we have a module for data classification. So if it allows you to search through the catalog and find the data fields that potentially hold. Let me run it and see what it generates. Right. So these are the fields grouped by the column name. Right. So account number. What we think is a personal data and is a bank account information. So when I save it. Let me save it. I will have a number of additional fields, GDPR classification and data domain. So this is what we think those data represents. You can override it manually, right? Yeah, this information will be included in the export. If you use some custom reporting, or you can drill down to our database, so you have a repository in the database, you can list those fields easily. You can run this report, right? So data classification explorer, and yeah, if you choose GDPR, then you have all those fields, and you can basically copy this, and this is your repository of the GDPR information. Okay. If you have any more questions, please share them right now. We have a couple of minutes left. Okay, I do not see more questions. I hope that was insightful, and what you can do is to go to our website, download the tool. We have a 30-day free trial, so you can try all this what I just showed you, and build a repository, share documentation, find personal data. Yeah. Okay, that was it. I hope it was very useful for you. Hope to see you in future webinars. Thank you very much, and goodbye.